Hey guys, welcome back to Sports with Mono and Mono. It's March 5th, 2022. I'm Mono, and the other guy there, he's Mono too.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show.
So, Steve, we talked with Rob before the show. It's kind of a slow week, but I think we got plenty of stuff to talk about. But we're going to lead off with the monologue, which belongs to you this week, and of course is sponsored by Coriano Trucking of Summer Hill, New York.
You bet. So I narrowed my choices down to two topics. Obviously, the lockout for Major League Baseball was, obviously prevalent all week, but I decided on tonight Coach K. Coach K coaching his last game at the Cameron Indoor Arena in Duke, and you know my memories of that are such. Time flies. I think we talked about it. I made a statement a couple weeks ago on where time didn't really fly. Maybe Tom Brady, I think, if now that I remember, 22 years of Tom Brady didn't seem like to me flew by like that. But Coach K, that's a different story because we remember Coach K when he was young, right? He's 75 years old. Okay, he's been at Duke for 40 years, right?
Yeah.
And change, right? So at work yesterday, I was driving to work, and Bobby Hurley, who's the Arizona State head coach, was being interviewed on the fan, and I loved it. Right, so Bobby Hurley, early '90s, just reminiscing about Coach K. Right, so Bobby Hurley was in this devastating car accident his first year in the NBA. He got drafted by the Sacramento Kings, and 48 hours after he woke up from this horrific car accident, who was in the room? It was Coach K, Bobby Hurley Sr., and Bobby Hurley's mother and brother, right? So that was a good story. Just a reminder of the family of what Duke means, okay? Also, a couple days ago, I heard on the
Oops, like we have a frozen mono here. Having some technical difficulties here, Steve.
Yeah, Steve, go back on and we'll get you back on the air. Anyway, speaking of Duke and Mike Krzyzewski's final day.
Yep.
I have a quick story. I was never a big fan of his, but if you remember basketball back in the late '80s, when I was in high school, Elmwood Park, we had a center. We had a 6'5" center, Scott Miller, who was a pretty good player and with the Rutgers on a football scholarship, actually.
Okay.
So because he was a big guy, our basketball team, which was coming off some state championships a few years earlier, in the preseason, we scrimmaged Bloomfield. And in the audience during and again, I was like a sophomore, so I was just there as a JV and stuff. So in the audience is Mike Krzyzewski when he was recruiting Ala Abdelnaby out of Bloomfield.
Okay.
But the only reason a big school like Bloomfield was playing a small school like Elmwood Park because we had that big 6'5" lineman of a center. So I guess he could get some practice against somebody almost his own size.
Mm-hmm.
I remember getting we all got his autograph before we left because we're all like in awe, But through the years, I became more of a Tar Heels guy myself.
Well, Rob, as far as Steve bringing up Coach K, I certainly wanted to touch on that as we rapidly approach March Madness, of course. But I'm a big fan of Coach Krzyzewski's. I have been for, and Steve brings this up that it's hard to believe that we're 40 years into when he first took over, and it was kind of a surprise, but he was a Bobby Knight protege, and when Steve mentions Bobby Hurley, I think Coach K has actually said that's one of his all-time favorite players, and he's won 5 national championships, and tonight being his last game at Cameron Indoor, it's, the ticket's hotter than even the Super Bowl ticket. So it's kind of crazy that it's the end of an era. But I've always been a big Bobby Hurley fan and a Coach K fan, and it's not that I would pay $5,000 to go see his last game, but it's something that's kind of made the headlines from a NCAA basketball perspective.
I don't know. I haven't noticed their schedule. Are they projected for the big dance, Duke?
Oh yeah, they'll definitely. They actually.
I wasn't sure. I haven't really paid attention.
Yeah, no, they've actually won the ACC regular season title. Actually, hard to believe, but it's been the first time since 2010 that they've won that. I don't know what's gone on for a while, but no, they'll definitely be in the big dance, and that'll take the headlines as March Madness rapidly approaches, and we'll talk about that next week. Because next Sunday is Selection Sunday. So a couple other things I wanted to touch base on with college basketball. I mean, when you look at who are going to be the number one seeds, I think you got to, without a doubt, say Gonzaga and Arizona will definitely be number one seeds. But look who's, look in the rearview mirror. I mean, Kentucky started to really turn it up. So, they kind of had a couple of off years, but they're coming back. So I can't wait for March Madness. I wrote it on our column on JPM Sports Entertainment that March Madness, it's one of the best events in sports, no question about it. And it's exciting, and everybody does their office pool and so forth. So can't wait to see that tournament start, couple other things you mentioned is Duke going to make the big dance, but here's a couple of notable teams that probably won't make the big dance. When you look at some of the years that Syracuse has been having, right? They're probably not going to make it. Georgetown, I mean, look what kind of year they've had. They've lost like 17 straight, which leads me to when somebody other than Patrick Ewing loses 17 straight games at his alma mater, the coach is usually kicked to the curb, but he got a vote of confidence from his athletic director, so he'll be back. But that program has fallen on hard times. And, going back to when Patrick was playing, they were a dominant team. So, it's a different flavor from this year to years past when you don't see the Syracuses and Georgetown in the big dance. Couple other teams that are right now, Murray State, believe it or not, has the longest Division I winning streak going in. Jamal Murray's old Ja Morant's old alma mater, really playing well. So, put them in the column of sleeper to be, right? That's what always happens when you look at some of the teams that have made it over the course of time. I think a few years back, I think 3-4 years ago, was Loyola Chicago was a very big upset. That was the Cinderella, made it to the Final Four, ultimately getting knocked out. But what's more exciting, Rod, than March Madness? There's nothing more exciting than March Madness.
No, you're right. And we have a listener who's listed Rutgers there. I think Rutgers is a unique situation because they have a lot of pretty big quad one wins in the Big Ten, but yet
absolutely. We talked about Rutgers basketball. That didn't go unnoticed by us. They beat 4 top 10 teams in a row, but they've kind of come back down to earth. Ron Harper Jr. has been out, so I think that affected them. But I can see them getting an at-large bid if they don't win their conference title, at all. And Steve, I don't know, is Boston University Terriers are playing Navy they're in the Patriot League, so they have an outside shot at making the big dance for the first time in a while since I can recall, making the tournament. So again, it's this is the week where we have all the conference tournaments, so some get automatic bids, and a lot of teams, may win their conference title by winning the tournament, not necessarily having a great year, but that's what makes this so exciting for March Madness, and I can't wait. I just can't wait.
Yeah, I believe. Well, I'll find out my itinerary today because I always cover the Big East tournament in the Garden. So I'm not sure where I'm going yet until about 5 o'clock today, this afternoon.
Yeah, good.
Seton Hall is a 6 seed. We play Wednesday night. If they're a 5 seed, we play Thursday night. So.
Yeah, they've had a pretty up and down year. They got some good players on that team. I love the Big East tournament too. It's all in finals, always in Madison Square Garden. So it's college hoops is great. One other point I wanted to mention before we move off college hoops, because there's been rumors. Obviously Maryland has an open position. Vacancy at the head coaching job, and guess whose name has come up as a potential, and he denies it, which means that there's probably a pretty good chance he's going to take this job, is Rick Pitino in Maryland. He's currently done a great job at Iona, playing in the MAC, and my beloved Niagara University is in that conference, but they've gotten rolled. I mean, Iona's got 23, I think like a 23-4 record. So keep an eye on that, because, when Pitino says he's not going to do something, that usually means he's going to do something. And that's a pretty prestigious job, right?
Also, with that Maryland opening, another rumor is our coach, Kevin Willard, possibly going there as well, which I would say good riddance, because I'm not a big fan of his, but
Seton Hall coach. Right?
Yep, Seton Hall coach.
Yeah.
Never forget, Louisville's open too. Another opening. And of course, Pitino will never go back to Louisville.
Oh, no. But Maryland, he'd take that job in a minute. I mean, that's way more prestigious than Iona, but you got to give the guy credit. I mean, he is a good basketball coach, his personality aside. So, Rob, let's move on real quick and touch base. A couple of things. We pretty much beat the NFL to death, but this is the start of draft season, right? So the combines are underway in Indianapolis. Some guys have opted to be in it. Some guys have opted not to be in it. But when you look, some of the number one guys you got to look at, this quarterback from Liberty University, I think Malik Willis, has suddenly emerged as one of, probably or most likely the first pick in the draft from a quarterback position, which is a big surprise. Kind of a small class this year with maybe Kenny Pickett being the other one, but this is what comes out of the combines, that he has a small pair of hands. Well, he's done pretty well. He came in probably 6th in the Heisman Trophy. So the combine is always interesting prior to the draft, and with the Kuipers and the McShays, all their mock drafts, a lot of that gets fine-tuned before the NFL draft based on some of the results from the combine. So let's see how that goes. And then obviously, as we get closer to the draft, which is I think near the end of April, some things will emerge. I mean, there's still some talk about who the number one overall pick would be. And I think on a lot of people's boards, it was this kid Hutchinson from Michigan. And I'm not so sure whether or not he's worthy of a number one pick. He could be a good player, but I don't see him like a Joey Bosa type player, but it's possible. It's possible.
Okay, well, Jim, getting back to Pickett real quick, I saw a graphic after they, said he had too small of hands for the NFL, right?
Yeah.
And there was a list of quarterbacks with this on or about the same size hand that he has that made it in the NFL, and that number was 0. So it's kind of weird. It was kind of weird that because everybody says Joe Burrow, but Joe Burrow actually had 9 inches. So I think his was like 8.5.
Okay.
on his
Okay.
hand. And
Yeah.
maybe I'll find it if Steve gets back on, but it was pretty funny. Like other quarterbacks with the same size hand in the NFL combine who made it to the NFL, 0.
What? Who was that? Who are you talking about?
I don't know. There was just someone. It's probably CBS Sports. I gotta double check it. But again,
Okay.
they listed other quarterbacks with the same size hand who actually made it and played in the NFL.
Oh, I
as a
got you.
quarterback.
I got
And
you.
it
I
was
thought you were
nobody.
talking-
It was nobody.
Okay. Well, listen, I think Pickett, like I said, there seems to be slim pickings in quarterback position in the NFL. So he's certainly going to get a shot, whether he's got small hands or not. I think he's a Jersey kid, also. Matter of fact.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. So listen, before just a couple of the quick notes in the NFL. Obviously, I don't even want to touch on the Aaron Rodgers situation because that's just going to go on for 6 months. But you're hearing a little bit more activity on the Russell Wilson front, and I think with the whole new leadership team in New York with the Giants and so forth, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they make a deal and Russell Wilson comes. Now, you guys know I've been on this show for forever, and I still like Daniel Jones. I think he deserves another chance, but you got to be aware that I think Russell Wilson's days in Seattle are pretty much over. Just where he ends up is remains to be seen. I wouldn't mortgage some top draft picks for Russell Wilson. I'm a big Russell Wilson fan, but at this point in his career, I just don't know that that's worth taking a shot at. It's kind of like Brett Favre going to the Jets after a great career in Green Bay. It may not make sense, but I'm not ruling that out.
I believe Washington offered 3 number ones and they declined it.
Yeah. So I don't know. Well, I don't think anybody wants to go to Washington. So I don't see that. Russell Wilson has veto rights on wherever he goes. But Steve, we were just talking about that. I think there's a possibility that Russell Wilson could end up in the Giants in New York.
And then, as I was saying about Coach K in my monologue, and that's why I chose that.
Yeah, we crossed that bridge already.
Have a good one.
Thank you, Rob. So what's the discussion? You were saying Russell Wilson could end up a New York Giant.
Yeah, I was talking about, the combine and who's, moving up on the draft board. We talked about Malik Willis and so forth. But we talked about Russell Wilson. Looks like his days in Seattle are numbered. So I'm not ruling it out that he ends up in New York, and I'm not going to sign off on that. Not for 2 number ones.
You're not.
Right.
But Russell Wilson's 33 years old, I believe.
Exactly.
And your trepidation of giving up 2 number ones is what exactly?
I just don't. I think his best days are behind him, and I think you got a young quarterback, and I would stick with Daniel Jones. So that's my thought on it.
If Seattle is dumb enough to trade Russell Wilson to the New York Giants, not only can they have Daniel Jones, I would give them 2 number 1 draft picks.
Okay.
I will give them whatever they want, and then you have your franchise quarterback. We just saw Tom Brady work up until 44 years old. We see Aaron Rodgers at 38, 39. Russell Wilson's 33. So for 5 or 6 years at a minimum, you're not willing to give up 2 first-round draft picks to get.
No, I don't.
Quarterback.
As much as I like Russell Wilson, I don't put him in that Tom Brady. That's an anomaly altogether. And
I'm not comparing him to Tom Brady. My only comparison was Tom Brady worked up until 44 years old, which would be 11 years from now for Russell Wilson. So, yes.
And one other note as we approach the end of, quote unquote, the league year, which means they got to cut guys. What are your thoughts on the Cowboys looking to probably cut ties with Amari Cooper?
As everybody knows, I've defended Amari Cooper. I'm a fan of Amari Cooper. I gave up a first-round draft pick to get Amari Cooper. However, the Cowboys' contract was worded such, we got 2 years of pretty good production out of him. but we owe him $20 million in 2 weeks. Can't pay him that. It's just not going to happen. I got too many other free agent needs. Thank you, Amari. We're not paying you $20 million, but to the Cowboys' credit, again, they structured this contract by where they could get out of this for a relatively pittance of a.
And I was surprised to know that he's still only 27. I thought he had a little bit more miles on those tires.
Oh. And I don't know if he's getting $20 million from somebody else, but Amari Cooper won't be unemployed for long. That I can.
Right. And one other quick thing from the NFL, Brian Greasy moves out of the booth and onto the field, takes the quarterback coach job for San Francisco. So obviously, listen, I was a big Brian Greasy fan. I liked him at Michigan. I liked him in the booth. And I guess they think he knows how to mold this Trey Lance into the player that, but I thought that was a surprise. I thought he was pretty good in the booth. I liked him.
Yeah, I mean, but he got bumped out of the Monday night gig,
He did.
$90 million to Troy Aikman, and he's a football guy.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
So
I like Brian Greasy too.
Yeah. So Steve, let's touch base, and I wanted to follow up because it was something you were going to bring up on the monologue, is this Major League Baseball and the lockout, and that's obviously still going on. So through the first officially two series of opening day and are going to be canceled. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, obviously it's going to get resolved, right? There's too much money at stake. But is it really this luxury tax? Is this the number one issue? When we're talking millions and millions of dollars, they're that far apart. Does that sound right to you?
I think this is being held up by the small market teams that, I don't know, the owners of the small market teams.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to sign off on this, right? All the owners have to sign off. It's not a majority vote by where this would have been done. It would have been done. So, again, is it about the money? Yes. It's about the players wanting certain amount of money, certain I think there's 3 or 4 issues left on the table.
Yeah.
But this is so bad for business. So obviously there's been other work stoppages, and I read something about how long it took or what percentage of drop off was there from the fans and viewership and attendance and all this from the previous.
What, from the last strike or lockout?
20%, which was a huge number compared to the previous work stoppages. 6%, 7%, that type of thing. I think this is going to severely impact baseball's attendance. I really do. And I get it. It's the streaming. It's, all this other stuff. I really think this is bad for business. And,
Well, I think there's also another issue. And again, this is, that seems to be at the forefront on top of the luxury tax issue, is the postseason. I mean, they want to expand this to 14 teams. This is getting out of control. I mean, the thing about baseball
is out of control,
right? But baseball, that was what always made baseball unique, right? Was you win the division, you make the playoffs. In the old days, in the 40s and 50s, it was 4 teams. Now, I mean, it's losing its appeal. You're going to probably have sub 500 teams making the playoffs.
Not probably. You are.
But I get that it's about money, but it's taking away, I think, from the overall image of baseball by everybody gets in. A lot of people used to joke that who doesn't make the playoffs in the NHL, and the answer was pretty much nobody. Everybody got in, right?
Yeah.
So what does the regular season mean? So I think,
especially in baseball, when there's 162 games.
Yep.
I mean, that is right. It says it all. It does. And it's no joke. I think just in passing, as fans, we again we talk about how tough hockey players are and football players, this, that, and the other thing. And I do make jokes, well, I can't pitch because I might have a fingernail, ooh, ooh, boo boo type of thing, right?
Yeah.
But 162 games is a hell of a lot of baseball.
Yeah.
And I think it devalues the 162 games, what it takes to make the playoffs. So when you got 14 teams or 12 teams out of 30,
Yeah.
and again, it gets to the small market owners. So why would they pay extra money to go get a top tier player to get you over the hump when if you're 5 games under and you happen to be the 12th or the 14th team to make
You
it,
get in anyway, and
get
then
in
anybody
anyway.
could win. That's right. Yeah.
So the competitive balance type of thing,
Well, here's my solution, and
I'm
you're
not
right.
down with that. I think it's too many teams.
And I don't know what the
So it's about
fan
money.
reaction to it will be, but you know what? There's alternatives, right? There's minor league baseball. Go see the Somerset Patriots. Go see the Rockland Boulders, and you can get a beer for $3 and a hot dog for $1. You know what? So if you're tired of paying these exorbitant prices for Major League Baseball, there are alternatives.
Yeah, to defend the players a little bit, our loyal listeners know I did a monologue months ago about minor league baseball and the conditions thereof, right? To the players' credit, they are looking out for the younger players. They are negotiating better pay rates, things like that. The free agency of if a rookie comes up and that extra year or what have you, the owners have capitulated on that, so they don't have to wait 6 years. It's the 5th year, things like that. So
Yeah.
We'll see what
Oh no,
happens.
I absolutely I agree with you that I think the 5-year limit before you're eligible for free agency. I think that's fair enough because these kids are young, and the young players like Tatis and Guerrero, these guys are making mucho bucks already because they're above and beyond. But I agree with you. The average guy, he should be able to get whatever they're willing to pay sooner than later. I think that's a good point.
Right. And just to finish on that, I mean, the rule was the rule. So they had negotiated that. But then when the owners flaunt something like that, and if you go back to when Chris Bryant was a rookie for the Chicago Cubs, ownership had him. They didn't have to pay him. They could bring him up, or if he didn't play, I think it was 50 games, something like that.
Yeah, there's a minimum, so they could keep him in the minors, so that doesn't count as a year of service.
So then once the other owners saw what the Cubs were doing with Chris Bryant, this became a trend.
Yeah.
Right. And as a player, you're being owned by this owner type of thing for 6 years, which is a lot of money. It's a lot.
I agree. So there's a lot of blame to go on both sides, I think, which, but the net is opening day is going to be delayed, but this will be resolved in the next, I'm going to say week and a half.
I have to think May 1st, they'll be playing baseball.
I agree.
Because if they're not, ouch. Ouch to them. Not us.
Well, so with baseball, and our baseball segment was sponsored by Lynch Toyota of Manchester, Connecticut. Again, they've been with us for a long time, and we certainly do appreciate that. So, Steve, let's move on to probably not our favorite topic, but the NBA, right? Couple of things. You and I joke we have grown to have such a disdain for this guy James Harden, but they're 4-0 with him, and it looks like a good combination with him and Embiid. How about this kid Maxey for Philadelphia? He's come along, and so now they got three players like the Nets do, right? Durant just came back. Irving will ultimately, they'll lift this mandate before the playoffs. But I think they're in definite trouble. But I like when I see, can the Nets rebound from this? Is Kevin Durant enough to push them into the conference finals. Can they beat the Bucks? Can they beat the Heat? I don't know.
No,
What are your thoughts on,
no,
on
no,
this?
they can't. And yeah, the Sixers are 4-0, and Harden and Embiid look, like Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Formidable. Right.
And again, Daryl Morey, the GM of the Sixers, I said about this Ben Simmons thing, was going to wait and wait and wait till he could get the most max value, right? And he did. Now the Knicks inquired about Maxey. Maxey is out of Kentucky. John Calipari is on record. I think this is his second year saying that how good Maxey is.
Yep.
And I'll give Daryl Morey credit. He didn't part with Maxey. The Knicks. The Knicks. I would hope they would have asked for him. We talked about Seth Curry and the other assets that they got.
Well, Knicks have nobody to offer for somebody like a young talent like that.
No, I'm just saying that, the Nets I'm talking about, so the Harden deal, right? So Maxey's going to be a nice player. I'm not buying Sixers stock. I like the Bucks. I like the Heat. Mike Garvey down in Florida, big Heat fan. And
yeah,
I am not putting my chips in with James Harden under any circumstance.
And one of the games that I actually happened to watch was the Knicks Bucks, and on that floor was a lot of talent, and I can't see just because Kevin Durant comes back, he's still top 2 player in the league. I just don't think they have it together enough. Similar to what we thought, the beginning of the season, we talked about it with the Lakers, right? How could they not win this title? And I even fell into that rabbit hole with Anthony Davis and LeBron James and Russell Westbrook. Well, that's blown up just like it's blowing up in Brooklyn.
Yeah, and in a roundabout way to answer your question about Brooklyn, no, I don't foresee them winning the title. I don't think Kevin Durant is enough. I think the Kyrie Irving nonsense is impactful. And Ben Simmons hasn't even played a freaking game for the Nets yet.
Oh God.
Okay. And then out on the West Coast, the Lakers are an absolute disaster. I think they're 8 games under 500 now. I have to think LeBron James is hurt. I do. He has to be. Anthony Davis. I don't know if Anthony Davis wants to be a Laker anymore. He's hurt an awful lot. Russell Westbrook is a disaster in LA, even though this is his home. This is where he's from. I don't get it.
I don't think it's an issue with LeBron James being hurt because he has more at stake than certainly Westbrook or anything. He's got the rings, and he's ultimately going to retire as the NBA's all-time leading scorer. So he's racking up the points in a ugly situation out in LA. I don't think he's hurt.
Listen, my point is, I don't care if he's hurt. And I don't care about the Los Angeles Lakers and reveling in the fact that they're 8 games under 500. Okay, but LeBron James, at some point the era is going to end. And
when you look at the West, and it's really hard to pick against Golden State and Phoenix, like we talked about. Here's another team that's really coming on, kind of equivalent to the Heat in the East, is the Mavericks in the West. This Kai Doncic can carry a team, man. He's really, really good, and they got some good players around him.
Yeah, I mean, I stayed up, watched the Knicks and the Suns last night. And the Suns went on a buzzer beater, Yeah,
I think Cam Johnson hit that from North Carolina, right?
Yeah, but Phoenix is good, man. They're really good.
They are good.
The Warriors are formidable. Mavericks, yeah, they got Luka Doncic. I'll grant you that, but I don't think they're much of a threat this year. Going forward doesn't mean they're not.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on in the major sports. A couple of things, right? We're getting, pretty close to Masters time in golf, right? So we talked about the Mickelson thing, and one thing that is. I don't even understand is this award that Tiger Woods won that Phil Mickelson thought he was going to win, the Player Impact Award. As $8 million. I mean, we know what kind of impact Tiger Woods has had in major golf. But there were a couple
I read that. I'm like, what the hell is this?
I don't even know what it
Why
is.
don't you just
but-
cut him a check for $8 million and call it a day?
Right, like he needs another one.
Right. Right.
But there were a couple other things that happened in golf, right? The first Austrian wins a PGA Tour event. This kid, Sepp Straka from, not really, he didn't have an Austrian accent, but the first quote unquote Austrian to win on the PGA Tour wins the Honda Classic. And this week is, this to me is the Arnold Palmer Invitational is kind of like opening day for me in golf, right? We're getting close to the Masters. This is where all the big names start to show up in the entire field, right? Golf has been going for 3 months, but they don't have that marquee field that they do, and it usually starts with the Arnold Palmer Invitational down in Orlando this week, and that all that means to me is the Masters is a month away. Can't wait.
Yeah. Did you happen to see John Rahm miss a 10-inch putt? See highlights of it?
Yeah, that's something that even you and I have never done. Of course, we've done it.
That's my point. It's like,
Yeah,
gives validation to us. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like that.
so golf is starting to heat up, and guess what's not too far down the road too. I wanted to bring this up because Kentucky Derby is only 2 months away, but there's a couple of early favorites that I wanted to bring up now, and one of them, Messier, yes, named after the captain. So he's got a pretty good foundation for him. The only problem is he's a Baffert horse. So if Baffert is still continuously banned, then Messier won't run in the Kentucky Derby. But that's one of my on the board early favorites.
Could be my favorite
That,
name.
as well as another horse called White Abarrio. So obviously 2 months away, there's a lot of, you still got the Florida and the Arkansas Derby and all those other prelim races before Kentucky. But I'm kind of getting excited. There's a lot of good horses out there. Another horse out of American Pharoah called Forbidden Kingdom. So I know it's early, but there's a couple of horses to keep on the board for now.
All right, I'll be following Messier.
Our buddy Corey Cole should be interested to know as we get closer to that. We'll certainly do our Kentucky Derby preview. But Corey, stay tuned. There's a couple of horses to keep an eye on way ahead of the race.
You bet.
Steve, let's move on to our random points of interest. A couple of things. With this whole situation in the Ukraine and so forth, there's been a lot of backlash against Russian players and so forth. But I thought the most interesting thing was Dominic Hasek calling out Ovechkin, that the NHL should ban Russian players, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. But, you're talking about one of the greatest goaltenders of all time, calling out one of the greatest players of all time just because he's from Russia. And I just found it interesting to think I haven't heard Dominic Hasek's name in 15 years, and now all of a sudden he's got something to say.
Yeah. The only reason I would be in favor of banning Ovechkin due to the war is so he doesn't break Gretzky's record. Ha ha ha. It's ridiculous, obviously.
Yeah.
And
couple other
Ovechkin and so on. They pledge Putin good, right?
Yeah.
They have to. We saw what happened with Panarin last year when Putin not so good, right?
Yeah.
Backlash, all that.
Yeah.
It's silly. Dominic Hasek is entitled to his opinion, but
yeah. Just a couple other quick random points, Steve. What are your thoughts on this NFL, right? Now they're playing in Germany, and they're going to play a game in Mexico City, and they're going to play a game in London. I mean, is this something that the teams want to do? Do they want to play in Germany?
Yeah. Actually, I lived in Europe in the early 90s, and I actually saw 2 games. I saw 2 preseason games. One was in Berlin and one was in Frankfurt, Germany. Saw the Cowboys Lions in a preseason game, and I saw the Denver Broncos and the Miami Dolphins in a preseason game, and the place was packed.
Okay.
It's all
I
about
just
money.
I didn't know
Yeah.
the foreign interest in the National
Oh, it's there.
Football League,
It's there. Yeah, and especially you have to remember too. There's a lot of Americans that live in Europe. I
Yeah.
mean, from the military on and so on and so forth, and business and so on and so forth. There's a lot of Americans that live in Europe. So,
Well,
yeah.
I'm going to tell you what this means to me. This means that at some point down the road, it may be 5, 10 years, but there's going to be an NFL team in London or something, because if the interest is that great, then I can see that happening, and that would be another moneymaker for them.
Listen, the benchmark will always now be 5, 10 years ago, Roger Goodell in front of Congress. There'll be no sports betting in the NFL, the integrity of the game, all this other bullshit, right? And here we are, right? I mean, you can't turn on an NFL game without an NFL gambling or a draft game, this, that, with Drew Brees and every other ex-retired NFL or anybody associated with the NFL is all in on this sports betting.
Yeah.
So to your point, nothing will surprise me. So a team in Europe, in London, or wherever it may be, you could. It's a foregone conclusion that'll happen.
Well, you know what? When you talk about that, and you and I have talked about it, my feelings on sports betting and how it could possibly threaten the integrity of sports. Here's a first. Connor McDavid, the first active player to sign on board with, and I'm not going to give the name because I'm not giving any plugs, but actually the brand ambassador for a gambling site as a player active in this league. And this is the same scenario we talked in sports where they banned Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle for shaking hands in an Atlantic City casino. I mean,
That's right.
It's crazy to me. That's the first and not the last. Like I said,
Right.
There's going to be active players across the board being spokesmen for these these gambling sites, and it drives me crazy.
Right. Think about if gambling was legal when Peter Edward Rose was in the dugout for the Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah. I think that's a whole different story.
It's a stretch, but my point is, right, this stigma of gambling with Peter Edward Rose, which again, he deserves not to be in the Hall of Fame because it says flat out. But my point is the culture and the mindset now of what gambling is. It's legal. It's everywhere. As opposed to Fay Vincent and John Dowd, digging and finding betting receipts and all this, and where, this cloak and dagger stuff and the dirty, filthy side of it. I like the Reds to win, period. You know my point.
Right, but the whole irony of this whole thing is 10 years ago, all the major sports said we want nothing to do with this, and now they're bedfellows. It's just crazy to me.
And the cash the checks is no different than any other check that they cash.
And listen, I wanted one other random point I wanted to bring up because it's something we talked about last week. It was actually my monologue was this Phil Mickelson and the Saudi Golf League. I love it. And the guy that came out and made some statements against Phil Mickelson was Pat Perez, who's a notorious hothead on the tour. And he's only won 3 times. But he called him out plain and simple and said he was all about lining his own pockets. And I give credit to Pat Perez for coming out and saying that. It was great. I loved it.
Yeah. I think we're all in agreement that Mickelson,
Yep.
what his motive is, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's what makes his spin, like we talked about last week, so utterly ridiculous.
Yeah. And one last thing before we move on, because I wanted to bring it up, and we talked about alternatives to baseball and college baseball, and our nephew is the pitching coach at Rutgers, and Rutgers baseball is off to a 7-1 start, and I listened to Brendan, do an analysis of the upcoming season, and it's great. And you know what? You know what it costs you to go see a Rutgers game? Nothing. So there's alternatives to baseball, so the owners and players can stay locked out for as long as they want. But I wanted to give a shout out to Brendan and Rutgers baseball, off to a great start. And
Yes, they are.
I'm happy for them. 7-1 start.
Yeah, this is year 3 for that Brendan and head coach is Steve Owens.
Yep.
They came from Bryant University together, and
Yep.
So they're trending very well. They're in the Big Ten, and things are looking up for the Rutgers program. So
Yeah, and they're off to Hawaii next week for a 3-game series in Honolulu. So it's pretty good to be the pitching coach for Rutgers baseball these days, right?
yes, it is.
So Steve, a couple notables we need to touch base before we wrap up our show. Dick Versace, former head basketball coach for the Indiana Pacers, passed away. I was surprised. He's 81 years old. I mean,
Dick Versace looked like he was 81 when he was 46.
That's what I thought. Wow.
Sparky Anderson obviously had the silver hair at age 34, 35.
Right.
And Versace Versace was the same way, but he had the curly look, but a real good basketball guy, and
big time. Yeah, I liked him too. He was good basketball guy.
Yeah.
Here's another one that passed away at a relatively not relatively. He was a young man. Is Shane Oliveira, and former Ohio State Buckeye and San Diego Chargers offensive lineman. And, he actually retired from the NFL because he was, addicted to these opioids and painkillers, which we've heard stories after stories about that.
Right.
But he ultimately turned himself around, went back, won a national championship with Ohio State, by the way, in 2002. But went back, got his degree and so forth. But I guess I don't know the cause of death, but he was a good football player and had a good resume. And, we talked about this addiction and how it just overtakes people at times. Hopefully he gets the recognition because he turned himself around and was an advocate against, all of this mental health issues. And I thought that was notable. 40 years old.
Yeah, I'm 40, way too young, obviously, but yeah. Shane, I remember him at Ohio State.
I do too. Yeah. Couple from the world of entertainment, and it's hard. A lot of people say I don't know who Ned Eisenberg was, but we know who he was because he was on Law and Orders, in SVU, and he was a good actor. He did a lot of things in Hollywood, and he was 65 years old. But if you just look him up, you'll recognize his face. I actually always.
Oh, that's Ned Eisenberg.
Exactly.
Too young.
Good actor, though, and a good resume.
Yeah.
And one other notable from one of our, I don't want to say all-time favorite, but a show we used to watch, My Three Sons, the guy Tim Considine, who actually played Mike, the oldest brother, in the first few seasons of My Three Sons. He passed away. He was 81. Yeah. And you know what he was also noted for? He was the soldier in Patton that Patton slapped in the 1970 movie Patton with George C. Scott.
Correct.
How about that? 81 years old.
Yeah. Obviously, I think the soldier that got slapped in Patton is a more important role for him. People obviously, associate My Three Sons with Don Grady as Mike. But yeah, 81.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's run in Hollywood.
Right. You got to be a diehard Hollywood fan.
Yeah.
Uncle Charlie's still going. William Demarest. William Demarest is. You know who the original Uncle Charlie was?
Yes, I do. William Frawley.
That is correct. Fred
But he
Mertz.
wasn't Uncle Charlie. He was Bub.
I understand that, but a lot of people.
And I'm sure our Facebook listener is joking that Uncle Charlie is not still alive. Because if Tim Considine was 81, then William Demarest must have been 181.
181, right?
Anyway, so we love to hear from you guys. We put it on the screen for us. Send us an email at sportswithmano@gmail.com. We would love to hear you, hear your thoughts on the upcoming, NCAA tournament, the Major League Baseball issues. We love to hear your feedback, and we'll certainly discuss it on the show when it comes up.
And watch Coach K tonight against North Carolina. It's
how fitting though that it's actually
it must see TV tonight. It really is.
And how fitting is that it's actually against North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
Two of our greatest college coaches, Dean Smith and Krzyzewski, in those schools face off in his last game.
And I know I got cut off on the monologue, but I did want to mention one thing that Bobby Hurley did bring up. So Krzyzewskiville. So when they sit outside for 2-3 weeks to get the seats, this all formed in like the late 80s or early 90s.
Yep.
It's become an institution around campuses, this, that, and the other thing. But Bobby Hurley, mentioned that, like, he'd see his friends, he'd see whatever, and they're sitting out there 2 weeks beforehand. And he just talked about, the aura that Mike Krzyzewski brought to Duke. And the pressure of the games and the importance of the North Carolina Duke rivalry, 10 miles apart. And he just reminisced about it, like just how cool it was, man.
I think Bobby Hurley was Coach K's. I think he's even said his favorite player of all time.
Yeah, and then I think right when I got cut off, I was talking about Johnny Dawkins. I was listening to an interview. Johnny Dawkins is the UCF head coach. To me, Johnny Dawkins is my all-time favorite Duke basketball player. Not only is Johnny Dawkins was a great basketball player, but Johnny Dawkins is one of the great human beings too.
And I'm going to go so far as to say, in that same vein, my favorite player was Grant Hill, and Grant Hill is just as classy as Johnny Dawkins has always been.
No question. There's a lot of great players that Coach K brought in.
So farewell. It's not Coach K's last game. It's his last game at Cameron Indoor, because they will make the tournament, and we will be talking about the NCAA tournament next week a little bit more in detail.
You better believe it.
All right, Rob, behind the curtain, thanks, and Steve.
Rob, thank you.
Catch up to you guys next week, and thanks for joining us, everybody, on Sports with Mano and Mano.